Some people say that they go out of the body, but they go into something else. And it wasn't like nothing, but they say they go into like another body, but it's not a human body. And they say it's not a glob of matter. It's like there's no form, no colors, but it's like something where they still like have some form of hands. And they all say like it's not a physical body. It's like an energy thing.
Welcome back to Out of the Box podcast, where Steele and I, your host, get to talk about outside of the box ideas. Today, we have a topic about near-death experiences, and this is a topic that we decided to continue because in previous topics that we've covered, we've kind of crossed it, half-assed it a little bit. So we wanted to provide a full episode just solely on near-death experiences. And I know Steele has done some research himself in that specific area with the book that he's been writing. And so hopefully we can have that out soon. But without further ado, Steele, let us know a little bit about your research. What have you found about near-death experiences? And any initial thoughts?
Yeah, so for this one in particular, I wanted to focus on the similarities between near-death experiences, because it's quite fascinating to me how there can be, it could be one thing of, like I said before in another podcast, if there's two or three reports and that's it. But the fact that there's like thousands of near-death experience reports, and not only that, like it would be another thing if they're inconsistent, but the fact that they are consistent between thousands of different reports from thousands of different people, to me that just points to, at the very least, an anomaly, something that we cannot explain. And the reason why we can't explain it or reduce it down to hallucinations, dreams, or things of that sort is because well, it turns out when the brain is dead, that stuff doesn't work. And I'm actually going to dive deeper into that if we have time at the end of this one. If not, I can push it to another podcast later on. But for this one specifically, I just wanted to like start out with the similarities themselves, just to kind of give everyone an idea that there really are these common themes. Like that's what we would call it in qualitative research, right? Which there's quantitative research, which is experimental using numbers and statistics. Qualitative research focuses on interviewing participants, and then looking at the statements from those participants, and then finding common themes that match most of the participants, or if not all.
Yeah.
So this is kind of similar to qualitative research, and it's actually a legit type of research that's peer reviewed and published in scientific journals and is taken seriously. And so I think this is interesting to compare that to. And I'm sure there are qualitative studies, because I know there's been near death experience studies published like in scientific journals and stuff. So what are the similarities? So I'm just going to give you a quick list. So across the board, across thousands of near-death experiences, people have very similar initial feelings. Like people say they feel relaxed, they feel peaceful right after they die. They're often like start on like darkness or something like that, and they just feel this kind of sense of peace or comfort. Not something you would expect after death. A lot of them also mention hearing specific noises. Sometimes they mention hearing music or like a buzzing noise kind of thing, or ringing sounds, like which they kind of say is like buzzing. People also interpret it as like hearing bells, kind of. So that's interesting how people kind of hear similar things. And then there's also the tunnel. Like almost everyone's heard about the tunnel, right? It's like almost a cliche at this point. But the tunnel thing has been found across the board on a lot of them. So it's usually like a tunnel of light. And some people describe it as a tunnel of light, but it's interesting. People will describe the same thing in different ways. So some people will say it's a tunnel of darkness, but the light is at the end of it. Or that there's multiple colors within this tunnel as they're going towards this light. And then
you hear it all the time in the movies, right? It's like look for the light, like search for the light or something like that, right?
And then there is, of course, obviously the outer body experience where the soul leaves the body. And that one in particular, there's a lot of similarities where people report seeing very specific details, like in a surgical operation or medical operation, where they would not have known those details if they had not left their body. where it just doesn't make sense for them to have that knowledge, or even specific things that happened when they were dead that that just can't, you can't account for that. The only reason they could have known is if they actually went outside their body, kind of thing. And then another one is approaching this, what they call a city, which they say is pretty big, and it's kind of just there, like in, they come to the city. I think it's like when they get out of the tunnel that they come to the city, and that they always describe like this wall around the city, and it's usually like a large stone structure with like gemstones in it and stuff. And not just like one or two people, like this is like thousands of people saying this. And then another very common thing is colors. They say the colors are beyond our understanding. Like they can't even find words to describe them. They
Mm,
say that the light and the colors, that no human being on earth could withstand them. Another one is like they say there's usually a landscape with like grass, trees, and stuff like that. They also mention a city, that's all like very detailed, glowing, and stuff like that. Various different buildings. People describe seeing a library, all kinds of different stuff. And then, of course, you probably heard this, Jose. Like people say they see their loved ones who had passed away, which is another
mm,
key thing. I think one person even described seeing someone that they didn't even know passed away until after they died. So that's kind of strange. You couldn't make the argument then that, oh, well, they knew they passed away, so that's why they hallucinated it, right? But they didn't even know that the person had passed away. It was that. They also, of course, say seeing a powerful being, which we believe is God. They say the being is like emanates this feeling of love and light, and that's the gist of it. Like that, those are like the main things people see. And of course, the life review. Almost everyone has like a life review. Then they say returning to the physical world is like a roller coaster, and that's often very painful. So yeah, I mean, I just think it's interesting how those just match throughout most, if not all, the near-death experiences.
well, yeah, it's like a similar process that people are taking whenever they experience these things. And like you said, if they were to be different, like we said in a previous podcast, like you said DMT is a certain drug that's
Right.
taken to hallucinate sort of stuff, but the fact that it has very similar aspects or similar experiences means that maybe they are tapping into something that is generally the same for everyone, right? It's a similar experiences. They are similar experiences, which means that the place that they're traveling or whatever they're experimenting could be a reality
Mhm.
that is outside of our reality.
Yeah, and a lot of people, like I said, during the out of body experiences, there's several patients in this one doctor's book he talked about, and he was even skeptical before he studied all this himself, where these patients describe cardiac like operations in very specific detail. And I think he did like a study. This is Dr. Raymond Moody, I believe, where he compared it and had people like people who just watched a video of like cardiac arrest, or just like read about it or something like that, and then tried to describe it, and compared it to the people that had the near death experiences and tried to describe it. And the people with near death experiences described it far more accurately. Compared to the people with general knowledge about it, actually described it less accurately and often made mistakes. So his argument was like, well, if they hallucinated or dreamed it, then they should be making mistakes too. It shouldn't be that accurate. And
Yeah,
sometimes they described it in such accuracy that, like the nurses and staff that were doing the operation said, like detail by detail, like what they actually did was described by the person who had the near death experience. Crazy.
yeah. And it's almost like when you experience something like that, to that level, it stays with you. So of course you're gonna remember, you know, like we remember the first time we rode a bike, or we remember the first time that, you know, one kissed a girl or something like that. Like you remember those little details. It's
Every
like
experience of
so
yourself.
emotional, so I guess big that you can't just but memorize what that felt or what that seemed like. And
Yeah,
so I'm sure it's a similar experience to those who actually experience those near death experiences.
Right, right. It is interesting. And what I find most interesting is how they describe the outer body experience itself, like how we talked before about the soul and what that would look like.
Mm,
They say firsthand what they experienced. So they say that they had no physical characteristics. Some people say that they can't describe it in physical terms. Some people say that they go out of the body, but they go into something else. And it wasn't like nothing, but they say they go into like another body, but it's not a human body. And they say it's not a glob of matter. It's like there's no form, no colors, but it's like something where they still like have some form of hands. And they all say like it's not a physical body. It's like an energy thing. And that is transparent, that it's like well then this other person says I'm looking at that it was like a ball, like a round ball that they're in almost, or like a capsule. Someone else calls it a capsule that is transparent, that it's like a ball of energy.
yeah,
And
and it kind of makes me think of what of the ideas that we have of ghost, right? Transparent, you could see through them, you know,
Mhm.
and so it makes me associate that too. Like maybe what they're going into is their spiritual body.
Yeah, and it's interesting how they describe it. Someone has like a capsule or something that they go inside when they leave their body. Like I don't know, it's pretty strange, and it makes sense that they can't describe it in physical terms because I imagine it's beyond our understanding
Hmm.
in terms of what it looks like and feels like. I don't know, it's just crazy. And then it's interesting how they also say about the light. They say the light has like thickness to it, and that it like penetrates things like to where it almost makes things like translucent or something like that. Like the light is so intense. One person said that the light is so intense that if you felt it on Earth, you would die instantly, kind of thing.
Wow.
Which I don't know. Is it memory? I'm sure you may have heard of this in the Bible about a person who saw God and died or something like that, right? Like
I can't remember.
that he that anyone who comes in contact with God as a human being on Earth just dies because it's too intense.
Yeah, I heard of that light aspect before. Not sure if I specifically read it in the Bible, but I have heard that, that it's, when people have had experiences of seeing God, it's like, God gives them almost the grace to actually see him, because if we were to see him in actual reality, it would just be too much to really take in, right?
Mm.
Um I imagine, the experience of Mary when she had the annunciation and she had an angel come to her, right? And speak to her. I wonder how that experience must have been, because it's I guess a transcendent being, that is not God, but a transcendent being that comes from there and, speaks to people. And so um I can't remember what that movie was called,
Oh, yeah.
where supposedly it's almost like an apocalyptic movie,
Uh-huh.
and some angels start coming from heaven in the form of humans, and they start taking like kids and stuff like that. But they shine with so much light that's just like so crazy to perceive, and you would have to be so I don't know, like you in a state of grace to be able to really see that, right? Because I'm sure it's
Yeah.
so much to take in, in
It
those
really
experiences.
definitely.
But to your point, like the light, yeah, I think that's something that I'm sure would be hard to really see in a physical form.
It is, and some people say they can't describe it. I think that's actually another common thing that wasn't on the list, but it's important to mention. A lot of these people come back from the death, experience, say that they can't describe it there's certain parts of it they can't describe in human words. Like this person says, like, I have to try to describe to you what I saw in three-dimensional terms, but I can't. It's just not adequate enough. Or other people say like the colors, I can try to explain it to you in in earthly terms, but it's just not good enough. It doesn't even come close to describe,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, and it makes sense if your spirit transcends into another dimension. We can't comprehend what's in the fourth, fifth
Yeah, like we
dimension,
talked
which
about
is what
John.
we were talking about,
Yeah.
right? The shapes, the colors, the textures, the movement of things, is completely different because we're talking about things that are moving outside of time. So there's not, you know, for example, I'm sure, you that omnipresence aspect where I could just teleport to another place just automatically is
Right.
a reality in the fourth dimension because you're not subject to time and space.
Hmm. And the other cool thing about it is how it correlates with the Bible too. Because a lot of the experiences you think if they were made up or something like that, or hallucinated, I should say, that it would be inconsistent. Even between them, it'd be inconsistent because hallucinations. I mean, the chance of two people hallucinating the same thing, impossible. Like in the same moment, hallucinating similar things, you could argue that, but thousands of people hallucinating similar things, it just seems so far fetched to me. Like that's when I become skeptical. I'm more skeptical of that. But the key thing about the Bible is a lot of the descriptions of this city match the descriptions of heaven in the Bible, like foundations on the city walls of jasper, sapphire, emerald, all that stuff. People describe all these gems, these specifically colored gems making up the wall and in the wall, even right down to the 12 gates of heaven, the 12 foundations, uh and the city's like width, length, and height. Some people,
And I want to ask, were
Mhm.
these people Christian?
Some of them were, but an interesting thing is some of them were atheists, and some of the atheists had gone to hell. So there's another side of near death experiences that's going to hell
Whoa.
and purgatory, and those are really intense too. But it's interesting to note the other thing that really, to me, strengthens the case for near death stuff is people of different religions who had near death experiences that are consistent with what we just talked about,
Mm,
consistent with the Bible instead of their own religion. And then what they end up doing after is they often leave their religion and convert to Christianity. There's even a guy, I think,
well,
who was rich, went through a near death experience, and he realized, I mean, after going through something like that, he's like, none of this money means anything to me anymore. And I think he
yeah,
donated.
well, once you go into a
Yeah.
four-dimensional state, like things in a lot of people talk about this, right? Like, when you die, I get to play music for funerals. When you die, you don't really take anything, in terms of like physical things. And so it makes you think like, oh shoot. And I'm sure maybe he might have experienced that, you know, I wish I could experience maybe something like that, or maybe I don't even know what I'm asking for, but
Yeah.
you know, it must be an experience where it's just like there's nothing else that matters at
Yeah.
this point, right?
If I
That then
remember
to experience more of that.
exactly. And if I remember correctly, I think what he did is he donated his money, like millions of dollars or something like that, and then just kind of lived a more modest lifestyle. So, yeah, like at the very least, with when people make life changes like that, when people convert to Christianity, or let's see what I'm reading. Oh yeah, it was a successful businessman called Dr. Revan Allen visited heaven, and he left the business world and used his money to help the poor afterwards. So when someone makes such a businessman making such a huge life change, or this guy called Howard Storm, who was an atheist college professor before his experience, went to hell and came back, and then now he left the position at a university and became a pastor for the rest of his life. I mean, he was an atheist before. Like, why would he make such a major? Why would anyone convert to Christianity when they're an atheist or a different religion, change from a businessman to live a modest lifestyle if they didn't genuinely, at the very least, believe what they experienced was really real and really true? If they thought it was a hallucination or a dream, they wouldn't make such drastic life changes. It just doesn't make sense. Like, who does that? You know, they
Mm.
must have believed, at the very least, they believed it happened. So, at the very least, they're not lying. Like, and people make that argument all the time. That's my final thought on this. I'm gonna wrap it up.
Mhm.
Is that people always make this argument with near death experiences that, oh, well, these people are just lying to make money off books. But it's like when you have a businessman who's making like millions of dollars or however much he's making, he's rich basically. Why does he need to sell books? Why does he need to lie?
Yeah.
Why do these doctors have to lie? They already make a ton of money being doctors. Why do they have to lie about near-death experiences to make more money? It just doesn't make sense unless they're so desperate for attention. But that just doesn't add up to me. It's not enough. And with
Yeah.
people changing their lives, an atheist professor leaving university and becoming a pastor, which pastors probably, I'm assuming, don't make as much money as professors at a big university. I mean, if he's lying about what benefit does he get out of lying about his experience to make money off of one book? I mean, it just doesn't add up to me. Like, what do you think about
Mhm.
that? Right, like as a
Yeah, well, I mean, a counter argument that I can foresee, as far as like becoming a pastor, is that sometimes some pastors do make some really good income. Um, but if he maybe decided to, like, you know, live humbly as well, and just, give everything away as well, I think that would be an interesting idea.
yeah, it'd be
Um,
different if he was a pastor who's making a lot of money off of it.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like he's using that to say like, oh, I actually went to heaven, or I actually went to hell. I've seen this, and can develop more credibility. You can say to his preaching, and whatever it might be. But believing in the essence of the message, I think that, yeah, it's pretty extraordinary that what people experience in these near death experiences, and the fact that it can be so transformative for people coming back, right, into reality, that it can almost do a complete 360 of their life. And I think more than anything, I think that once people go into that state, whether that be heaven, the fourth dimension, outside of fourth dimension, I don't know, whatever they experience, coming back into reality, it's like nothing else matters.
Yeah, it's a huge
Like
leap of faith.
all the societal structures of money, fame, all just crumble down, and it's like we don't know what we're living for,
Yeah,
almost, right?
even astronauts that go to space and see Earth from space say that all the wars, all the little conflicts, all the politics, none of it seems to matter anymore because you're not even on Earth anymore. So it seems
Yeah,
significant by comparison, you know?
yeah. It's almost like when people go into retreats, when people go into retreats, they go into retreats to separate themselves from the world, right, that is constantly speaking to them. So whenever they receive these near death experiences, or like you said, astronauts going into space, they remove themselves from from the situation, from where they are. They're able to see clearly what it is that really matters in life, right? you know and maybe we can have that be another podcast for another
Yeah.
day.
And that's
you
what I'm
know
these near death experiences, there's so much to it. Like on the research I've done, they can definitely be multiple podcasts on it and different parts of it. And yeah. Definitely.
yeah, but I guess that'll be our final thoughts. Thank you guys for listening in. If you were able to come to the end of this podcast, please feel free to leave us a message down below. What did you think was really interesting about near death experiences? Have you ever experienced a near death experience? We would love to know about that in the comments down below. Also, please subscribe to our channel, because we are completely committed to continue providing amazing content every week, and also hit that bell button so you can be notified when we do put up new content. So until next time, we will see you soon. Take care.